Morning, everyone. Welcome to Socialists at Work, YDSA, and the labor movement. Today we're going to have a little chat about labor, more specifically what challenges we face in renewing the labor movement and merging it with a vibrant socialist movement, what it's like to be a socialist, building a democratic, militant, left-wing labor movement in strategic workplaces, and lastly, what you can do to prepare for a life of class struggle at the heart of production, your workplace. We've got an all-star lineup of rank and file legends joining us today. So with Union Steward, an officer in Oakland, California. Rebecca Garelli, science educator in Arizona and Phoenix, DSA member. Kristen Cervero, former YDSA national co-chair and future rank and file nurse. Sean Orr, UPS truck driver, elected steward with Teamsters Local 705. And Dennis Kosuth, RN in Chicago Public Schools and Cook County Hospital. All right, let's start off with an easy one. Can each of you share how you became a socialist and got involved in the labor movement? And let's go down the row.
Hey everybody, my name is Sean Orr, he, him. I'm from Milwaukee. School. That was during the first Obama administration, the fight for universal health care, where that shook up, me and a lot of my fellow students, we were talking about how upset we were, and then somebody started passing around the Communist Manifesto, and that was a wrap. So I got involved in the labor movement because in Wisconsin, while I was in college,
Hey everyone, first of all, it's so nice to see you all in person after a very long 2 years. My name is Kristen, I use she, her pronouns. I'm coming here from New York City and New York City DSA. How did I become a socialist? Oh, and I'm on the labor branch OC in New York City DSA, and I'm going to nursing school hopefully soon. So I became a socialist. I think my consciousness was first kind of raised during the Bernie 2016 campaign. Like, hopefully many of you, was anyone here like inspired by Bernie's first run? Yeah, me too. I helped start a Students for Bernie chapter at my school at NYU, and that was like the first time I really got involved in any sort of organizing. And then the Bernie campaign ended, he lost, and I got involved in other like campus sort of activism. I was a member of Students for Justice in Palestine, in fossil fuel divestment organizations, in student labor action movement. And being involved in all of these organizations, I came to realize that, capitalism is the problem, socialism is the solution. It's like a very united effort. So that happened for a couple of years. One day I came back to YDSA and a really amazing comrade named Neil Meyer had started a chapter at NYU YDSA. So I immediately joined. They were like, hey, want to come to DC in 2 weeks? There's this thing called Winter Conference. So 2 weeks later, I was on a bus to DC in a very similar situation to some of you, hopefully. Meeting other socialists from all over the country who are involved in struggles locally, learning from them, and learning myself like what it means to organize, learning those very basic like bread and butter skills. I came back to New York City and got involved in some like New York Health Act organizing and some state Senate races for socialists. And then I realized what it meant to be like an organized socialist. It's very different. So that's how I became a socialist, and the rest is history. Right now, I guess I'm starting my involvement in the labor movement, going to become a nursing assistant and working in a hospital hopefully soon, and starting a nursing school. So yeah.
It's still morning. Good morning. As far as like how I became a socialist, I think I definitely grew up in a household that where radical politics were part of, what we did. My dad was drafted to fight in Vietnam in 1970, and that radicalized him. He saw what the effect of the war was on people, himself and others, and was like, this world's fucked up and I don't like it and I want to do something to change it. And so he was an activist, and so I kind of grew up in a household singing Solidarity Forever and all the rest of it. But I was kind of more like an anarchist because I don't think I had read much before I thought about what socialism was, and it was just basically like burn all this shit down and then maybe that can be a place to start. But then I went to college and I met a socialist organization and joined and learned to read the stuff that I was kind of quoting beforehand and thought a lot more about what it's going to take to change our society fundamentally. The reason I got involved in the labor movement, I dropped out of college. I just wasn't ready for it at 18, unfortunately, for my scholarships. In any case, I just worked a bunch of shit jobs, and a friend of mine who was also a socialist was like, we're gonna organize this restaurant we work at. Come get a job here. And then once I did that, I was hooked. I basically was on this search for October and would go from job to job that were basically looking for union jobs. I definitely had a lot more failures than any kind of inklings of success, but I learned a lot through those processes, and so that's why I'm here today.
Morning, everybody. Really excited and happy to be here. How I became a socialist, I was an angry kid. I was always looking for where the injustice was and trying to figure out, what can I do about it. In college, that led to being a college activist, went to lots of protests. In the end, I think I ended up feeling very cynical about those protests because it always felt like there wasn't a clear goal or ask, and often we found ourselves like in the street shouting in an empty building while the police were going to just sweep us off the street, maybe like in the next half an hour. And so that all kind of rang hollow to me until I found organizing in the workplace. And for me, getting involved in the labor movement just came from the normal frustrations and anger that we all have at work because the boss controls our time. And often the way that they control our time is very unfair. It doesn't make sense. It might not even help you do the work that you're supposed to do. And for me, I think like when the light bulb really went off is when I got angry with the boss and then started seeking ways that other people had successfully dealt with that anger and turned it into having some power in the workplace with their coworkers. And for me, that was not getting breaks as a nurse in New York and finding out that my coworkers were also upset about it because we had this choice where we had to walk away from our patients if we needed to use the bathroom, get food, and you have a lot of internal tension and conflict there. You want to take good care of your patients, but also you need to take care of yourself to do it. And it made us really upset, and I wanted to, get the governor to come and call the press, and I had to figure out the press won't care, the governor doesn't want to come, and so we have to do something else. And we ended up marching on the boss, who broke down in tears and and met with us on shift for several hours in a row, and backpedaled and finally backed down and gave us some breaks. And that, I think, is like what really solidified my commitment to organizing at work, being a part of the labor movement, and knowing that socialism was something that would be part of my life, the rest of my life.
I feel like we grew up the same way. I think my entire life, like you said, I understood the injustices and I always wanted to do something about it. I grew up here in Chicago on the Northwest Side in Edison Park, and my first protests were down at the Daly Center against the Iraq War when I was in college at DePaul University right here. And it didn't dawn on me that like this was what I wanted to do with my life, really, until I became a Chicago Teachers Union member, started in 2004. And I actually, I worked right around the corner at Talcott Fine Arts and Museum Academy, right here on Ohio and Damon, literally walking distance from here. I worked there for 10 years, and I was radicalized by the horrific treatment of brand new teachers just out of college. And I had a principal who basically hired me to be like a full-time substitute. It's called a temporary assigned teacher. And he placed me under the wrong bucket number, which meant I was paid as a substitute. So not honoring my labor, not honoring the value I bring to the space. And I went right to the union. And sure enough, my union rep, who's also a delegate and actually was a regional organizer for CTU, her name is Stephanie Collins. She's now with the Black Caucus of CTU and co-chair in that space. She really stood up for me. And she marched and she said, we're gonna stand out here. There were 5 veteran teachers, and said, every day we're gonna stand out here outside of the principal's office. And he's gonna watch you talk to the union. And we're gonna say things like grievance out loud. I said, yep, I'm in, let's go. So we did. Turns out I ended up winning for my very first time. Yeah. And the audacity of this man really radicalized me more than you can ever imagine. And he said, well, aren't you glad that I acted like your savings account? Because I was going to get retroactive pay in a tune of about $10,000. And he talked to me that way. And right then I was hooked. I was never leaving the union. I was doing whatever I could to get involved in the union. But it all came too much. I went on strike with CTU in 2012. I was a leader in my building. Out of the strike, I became it's called the PPC committee, the Site-Based Organizing Committee. It's Professional Problems Committee. I served on that for quite a while, but the system broke me. I quit in 2015. And I moved out to Arizona, and I didn't realize how good I had it with CTU. It was horrific in Arizona. It is horrific in Arizona. And I stood up, I made that Facebook page called Arizona Educators United, and here I am 4 years later, building the biggest movement Arizona has ever seen. Woo! And just to note, I had a late awakening as a socialist. I didn't know what it was called. And finally, when Bernie came along, I went, this is what has made me angry my entire life. It's capitalism. I didn't know what to call it. Now I do. And so thanks to Bernie, I'm here.
While we aren't living in the heyday of American radicalism, it's a very exciting time to be a young socialist. Brave workers like those in CTU are reviving the tradition of class struggle unionism and spreading the hope of labor across the world. Kristen and Sean, can you speak to why labor is central to our mission to win socialism, and what are the challenges facing the socialist and labor movements today, and what are the immediate and long-term tasks for socialists in the labor movement?
Yeah, so this is a really hefty question. I think I'm going to address the first part, why is labor central to winning socialism, which I'm sure many of you already know, either like inherently or from reading or talking to people. But it's good to remind ourselves that labor is where the power lies. And workers, us as workers, we're the ones with the interest to take on the bosses. We're the ones who need those conditions changed. We all become workers one day, and therefore we enter this place, where we're exploited daily for our labor. We're suffering systematically under the capitalist system, which thrives on our exploitation and the exploitation of the vast majority of people. So it's up to us as working class people. We're the ones that want to change that system. And fortunately for us, we actually have the power to fight capital. They, bosses, they need us to keep their pockets lined, to keep their wallets fat. And if we make demands of them that they won't meet, whether it be small demands, like in the Amazon organizing breakout yesterday, they were talking about how they wanted cold water at the warehouse. Or maybe here in Chicago when the teachers demanded funding for housing. If those bosses don't meet that demand, we can withhold our labor, we can take on all sorts of actions to make them meet that demand. We're not gonna settle. And when their profits are hurt, they'll make those concessions. So workers will also come out of this kind of action with sort of understanding of their power and this feeling of being brought together. And we come out of it with that feeling of solidarity, something that Sarah Nelson said was stronger than gravity, and I 100% agree. So just to reiterate, labor is really central for winning socialism because workers have the interest to change the system and the power to win the socialist.
So in terms of the challenges that we're facing in the socialist and labor movements in this country, for me, the central problem is the way that that was phrased, right? There's a socialist movement, and then there's a labor movement. They're not united, right? There was a time when there was that unity, right? In the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s, you had millions of workers in motion in this country in open class conflict with the exploiters. And that was when, you had the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, multiple other left formations rooted in the working class communities, in the workplaces. And we achieved some of the greatest victories our class has ever seen, right? And then at the end of the 1940s, the Cold War began, and the opening salvos of that war were against our movement here in this country. McCarthyism happened, came right out of my home state. Thousands of people lost their jobs. Parties were broken, a movement was broken, right? And ever since then, we've had these two separate strains, the socialist movement, rooted predominantly in academia, right? And the labor movement, rudderless now, without that long-term class vision of emancipation and socialism. So our immediate task right now is to bridge that divide, to reunite our movements. The socialists cannot survive without the labor movement, nor can the labor movement survive without that socialist vision. We need socialists to be willing to industrialize if they didn't come out of a working class family. It's important for people to get jobs rooted in the working class. And the reason why is so that way we can win more workers over to socialism. We can't achieve our long-term goals of a party, of a socialist society in this country without bridging that divide, and I think that's the central question right now.
This morning, we're very lucky to have some worker leaders who are at the core of some of the most inspiring worker struggles in this country in recent years. Johnny, Dennis, and Rebecca, can you tell us about a victory and a failure you've had as a worker organizer and what you learned from those experiences, either about the power of organized workers, how people think, the forces you're up against, how to navigate internal union dynamics, etc.?
Sure. So I think the biggest victory that I've had in my lifetime is going on strike with my coworkers and winning pretty big in 2020. This is something, thank you. This is something that didn't just happen overnight, but I think I'll tell you the exciting part first, and then I'll tell you about the grind that led to it. So the exciting part is that we went on strike during the beginning of the pandemic under some pretty difficult conditions. And our strike resulted in, so we're working at a public hospital system, and the strike was basically all of the workers except for the doctors and management, everyone going on strike. Our union's the biggest one, but there's another smaller union that has some of the nurses. So this is everyone that works in the hospital, food service workers, housekeeping, clerks, social workers, 250 different jobs. We went out on strike, and one of our biggest demands was to get the county to take financial and governmental responsibility for the county hospital system again. They basically privatized it, for lack of a better way of describing it. And on the second day of the strike, they came out in public in front of a giant picket line and announced that they were going to do that. They reversed their position. They'd been saying they would never do it. And then after that, we were able to negotiate a really good contract in the face of a whole bunch of takeaways that management had proposed. The county fired the entire hospital board. That was one of our demands, and they did it. And some of the board members that got appointed now are workers who are in our union. The CEO got fired, and we won this very good contract in the face of not being able to organize the way you normally would because of the pandemic. Now, what led to that is we intentionally, years ahead of time, planned for this strike. We knew that a strike was probably inevitable if we wanted to win any gains in the contract or win any better conditions for our patients. We knew that the employer would not be able to pay for anything unless we were able to get the county, not even our employer, but like a governmental body, to step in and intervene. And so we figured the only way to make that happen is to cause a political crisis where they have to step in and do that. And the reassuring thing to know about this is that it's not something we had to invent. What we were able to do actually was the successes of the teachers going on strike and all kinds of other strikes through history, like what Sean was mentioning, and figure out what did people do. And it turns out, actually, there's pretty much a formula for doing these things. There are too many things to talk about. The central parts of this are one-on-one conversations with your coworkers. And so we did exactly that. We had lots of reasons for going around and talking to people in the years building up to that strike. It might have been just a contract survey or a smaller campaign or getting people to sign a petition or marching on someone's boss because they have a particular problem in their department. And all of those things help us identify who are the leaders in various places. Our workplace has thousands of workers, and so we couldn't do everything with a small core of people. We had to identify leaders. So now in our workplace, we have a tremendous amount more power than we did before. I didn't tell you about a loss, but 'cause I don't want to take up all the time, but that's the biggest win that I've experienced. And it's something I think that many of the people in this room are capable of achieving also.
So I'll tell you about my biggest win, which was Red Fred Movement. 2018, we gained $434 million from a GOP-controlled legislature, which I think is incredible. With that came a 20% raise over the course of 3 years, but again, they divided us with their tactics, and it's only for a small pot of teachers. So the pot actually had to be broadened for support professionals, classroom aides, et cetera. So it's not really 20%. So they took a little bit of that back. Failure. While I've had many wins, both really, I'll tell you about a small win. As an educator organizer, right after the Red Fred movement, I was high on power. I was very, into like, we're gonna march on the bosses for everything. We learned that in my district, I worked in West Phoenix, and a district is like multiple schools in one space. We found out that other teachers were getting more time to put together their classrooms before school started, which is a big deal. And we learned that. I organized my coworkers. I said, can we go to the union? We went to the union. The union spoke to our principal, and we won equal time, just like that. And now it will be there forever. They can't take it away. Once we won it, it's not going anywhere. So small wins matter. They matter a lot. Big wins are exciting and amazing, but small wins are how we get people. Failures. I've had many, many, many failures. And we have to get used to that. Not that I want you to get used to that, but you know what I'm saying. It's about learning what happened, debriefing on how it could have gone better, and learning from it so that you can anticipate things in the future. And on a broad scale, we've had ballot initiative, two of them now, for a wealth tax in Arizona to fund public school at the tune of $827 million a year. And the opposition has now taken them away with counter arguments. They basically ruled it unconstitutional. There was lawsuit after lawsuit, and we fought back. We put another ballot initiative on 2 years later. We had one in 2018, one in 2020, and we still have not won that because of the forces that exist in Arizona through the legislature, where they created a new tax category so that they wouldn't have to fund our Tax the Rich initiative. So that's demoralizing in many ways, but we continue to fight in Arizona. We knew this was not going to be a quick and easy fight. It is a long road to success. On another note, as far as COVID goes, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids under the age of 7. One of them has respiratory conditions. My kid's district is in a very right-wing district in Arizona that is anti-science. I am a science teacher. This was the hardest fight of my life, to guarantee safety conditions for my own children. I organized the life out of it. As much time as I could, I organized parents digitally, community members digitally. I did petitions and letters and brought in an industrial hygienist to talk about ventilation, because I'm a science teacher. I give evidence. And I didn't win. Month after month after month, I must have emailed the board 75 times. I organized people to stand up at the governing board meeting and talk about it. I organized public comments when they shut down public comments. I made a form, we tweeted at them. You want to shut us down, we'll find another way. We alternate organize, and we just could not beat back the forces. We just couldn't. And that's demoralizing as an organizer, and it's demoralizing as a parent. I feel like I failed, and that was hard.
So yeah, I definitely appreciate those comments because it's not as glamorous as people may think that you're getting a job is just victory to victory. I definitely appreciate the slogan, when we fight, we win, but it's actually not true, unfortunately. When you do fight, you have the chance of winning, and I think that's the key thing. And I guess my comments as far as the victory, I think we have to get back to what a union is. A union is very simple. It's not a complicated idea. It's people in a workplace getting together, organizing to get what they want. It's not a complicated contract. It doesn't matter what acronyms make up your union. It's as simple as that. One of the issues that I was coming across when I worked as an ER nurse at County, which is a public health hospital straight south of here, it's a terrible indictment on what healthcare looks like in America for poor people. They were using the same building they were 100 years ago until about 10 years ago, when I would start in the morning, there were people waiting all night to get health care in the third largest city in the richest country in the world. And the constant problem in that ER was staffing. We never had enough nurses to give proper care to our patients. So we would do a petition. They kind of ignored that. We went and spoke at the safety committee of the hospital. They basically ignored that. We went and spoke at the Cook County Board. They had public speaking. We would go there and talk about the terrible staffing, and they basically ignored that. So the one thing we then realized is that overtime is a big issue, that is a big tool that the boss uses to get us to staff up. But overtime is also not mandatory. You can't require nurses to work overtime. So what we did is we had 100 nurses in our ER, and across all of our shifts, we basically played 2 weeks, and not a single person signed up for overtime for those 2 weeks. And they were kind of scratching their heads saying, oh, that's really weird. How come nobody wants this money? But then when the first day came about, they were like, oh shit, we can't staff the ER because nurses aren't signing up for overtime, and we can't force nurses to come to work because overtime is not mandatory. So on the third day of us not staffing the ER, it was really slowed down. It was messed up. The head of HR and the chief medical officer were basically in our break room saying, okay, what do you guys want? What do you guys want? We got to get this staffing back to work. And so it got their attention. It brought workers together across shifts. It brought people together to say that together we can do something. And this wasn't a contract. We weren't organizing for a contract. We had zero contract language around staffing. But what we did is we organized people together to put pressure on the boss to get something. And so while that was a victory in that it mobilized people and I recruited people to become union activists through that activity, it was also a failure in the sense that we didn't win more staff. They said, oh, we'll try really hard. We hear what you're saying. We'll try and get more nurses to come work here. But at the end of the day, we didn't have that victory. And workers the next week were like, oh, we should just all call out sick or all do whatever, just keep fighting them. But the fact is that it's long-term fights, takes long-term vision, and it takes baby steps, going up from the petitioning to speaking out to doing the overtime strike, but it's an ongoing process that people have to be engaged in, and getting back to that single root of what a union is workers getting together to fight for the things that they need.
Sean, you want to take that one too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that in terms of successes and failures on the job, at UPS where I work, I think that the best way to understand our day is that every day is a battle. Every day is the management of our shop, stress testing the strength of our organization on the shop floor, because we have had a union at UPS for decades. We have a relatively strong contract. We struck in 1997 and shut down the U.S. economy for almost 2 weeks. They know we have power, and they're constantly challenging that. So every day we have an opportunity to pick a fight. Sometimes we win. We often lose, right? Because one thing that management has the power to do, whether we can get someone's job back or not, if they want somebody to sit out for a couple weeks without pay, to make them hurt, to let them, to remind them who has the power over whether they're working or not working, they will do that. And that's hard. It is definitely a demoralizing fight that we're in. But we do have successes. And the successes come when we go beyond what's in our contract, when we go beyond the limits of the law, and we organize our coworkers and we take collective action. So over the Christmas season, we had one of my coworkers here in Chicago. She got on the news because she put a package over somebody's fence. Now, the news story did not talk about the fact this person had a sign on their front door saying, "Please leave my packages over my locked fence," and that's what she did. But her face was all over the local news. It was making UPS look bad, so the next day they fired her for damaging the company brand. This was a few days before Christmas, right? This is when everybody's all talking about the essential workers of UPS. Oh, they're always making our Christmas spirit. You guys are Santa Claus, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're getting fired for doing our job. So we were upset. We were pissed. Our coworker was humiliated in front of everybody in her family and in our workplace. And we knew the company we would get her back, because you can't get fired in our union contract for damaging the brand, right? We have cardinal infractions for a reason, but they can still make her hurt. They can still hurt her pocketbook. They can hurt her sense of pride in her job, her sense of agency. So what we decided was, well, they're not even probably going to bring her in for her discipline meeting. So we talked. We did a little bit of a phone tree, and we're like, you know what? We've got like 400 coworkers. Let's see if we can get all of, as many of us as possible to walk in together the next day and send a message to the company. We're staying united behind our sister. Bring her back. And we had built the trust of our coworkers. We had tested our organization before. Next day, we had 200 coworkers standing out there. This sister had only worked at UPS. His sister had only worked at UPS for 4 months. You had 35-year drivers out there in the cold for 2 hours with a smile on their face, because solidarity is the strength of our organization, and that's what matters. And we walked back in there, and that day, management scheduled a return to work meeting for her. We got her back to work. We got her full back pay, and she's working with us today.
All right, I'm going to throw it back to Sean, Rebecca, and Johnny. What knowledge and skills do you need to do your job and organize your coworkers, and how can YDSAers prepare to do what you're doing right now?
So I think that what you all are doing is good preparation for organizing the workplace. I mean, the skills to be a good organizer are kind of universal, right? It takes a willingness to learn. It takes a willingness to be humble, to make mistakes, to be willing to challenge power and maybe win and maybe lose. You have to be willing to do those things, right? But that's true on the campus, that's true on the streets just as much as it is on the job, right? So I would say that what you all are doing is good preparation for that. I think that in terms of organizing at work among coworkers, the number one asset you can have is trust, right? Because everybody knows a loudmouth. Everybody knows somebody who comes in and says, "Oh, I got all the right answers. I know all this stuff." I can go into work and I can preach to my coworkers about, the labor theory of value and on socialist history and stuff, and that might help them pass the time during the day, but I'm not going to advance, where the balance of power in the job, right? That takes a commitment to action, and it takes a commitment to organization. The lifeblood of that is trust. There's this great documentary from the 80s called Seeing Red, about where they interview a bunch of rank and file Communist Party members from back in the day. And there's a scene that I just love. I always think about it. There was a dock worker who was talking about a march to get unemployment insurance. And he said that the people marching didn't care if that guy. They didn't care about. They didn't know the difference between communism or rheumatism. They just knew that communist was going to doing the job, and they were going to follow, and they're going to be a part of that fight. So I think that trust is absolutely key. Willing to learn, willing to listen, never into thinking you have all the right ideas, because the class itself is the producer of the best knowledge we have.
So I'd say I 100% agree with what Sean just said. I think the most important thing that you need to be successful organizing at your job is to have the trust of your coworkers. That's how we would define a leader. One of the tasks of an organizer is to go find the leaders in the workplace or in your movement, because those are the people that will be able to move everyone else. And to be able to have that trust, you also need to be really good at your job. So this is something that I would say to all of you, is that you want to pick something for your work that's something that you can find as fulfilling as a job could be, right? So you want to find something that's not going to be the worst kind of awful grind, because hopefully you're going to be in it for a long time, for the rest of your life. And so that, I think, is the most important thing, is that the job be something that you know you can keep doing for a long time and that you get good at it. That's part of how your coworkers will end up trusting you. And I would say also, how do you prepare to do what we're doing? I would say have the anger, the agitation that you all have, that we all have just from being in this economy, in a capitalist economy, and that everyone organically has, whether they suppress it or they're conscious of it, being in a workplace where your boss controls your time. I think those are the most important things to be able to organize at work. Have the trust of your coworkers and be good at your job.
I will echo that. As an educator, you have to be good at your craft. You have to love being able to work with children in community, right? It's about being part of a community. That's why we're uniquely positioned, because we're in our communities, right? We have the power through community. So if community is something you love, being an educator is something that you'll be great at, but you also have to be good at your job as well. And the only reason I could be here today is because I am good at my job. I present nationally, and I was in Houston yesterday presenting at the National Science Teachers Association. You can't touch my resume. This is how I protect myself. I am very good at my position. I am very good at leading people. I've become a leader in multiple spaces, and it's from not being the guy who knows everything. It's being the person that's willing to take the risk. And that in Arizona is a very terrifying thing for many people. Taking the risks that we did, they needed a leader to do that and say, I'm with you, watch me do it. And teachers, our skills are about modeling. So we enacted modeling strategies for organizing. We did walk-ins. I live Facebook and said, here's how you do one. Watch me, now you go. We taught, we modeled, because that's what skills are for teachers. We are fantastic organizers because we can plan, we can execute, we can move people from A to B. We deal with a lot of resistance. I was a middle school teacher my entire life. If I can resist with those kids, I can pretty much handle anybody. And it's about knowing your craft, being good at your job, but also working together and being a leader, but bringing people with you. You are not above anybody. You are shoulder to shoulder, and it's that rank and file mentality that is how you build the power and have those conversations. Is I'm no better than you. You and I are in this together. We look to the side, we don't look up, and that's how we win.
So if you've been to any of the labor-themed workshops yesterday, you probably noticed a lot of facilitators putting emphasis on organizing in strategic sectors like education, healthcare, and logistics. And it's no coincidence that the panelists we have up here today represent those industries. Johnny, Sean, and Rebecca, why'd you choose to work where you're working right now, and what challenges do you face in your capacity as a worker and labor organizer?
I chose to work where I work now because the conditions in nursing job I was in New York were so horrible that I was looking for any kind of escape that I could. And I'd read a lot about the struggles that organized labor, so nurses in unions in California had to get a state law passed that puts a cap on our work rate, basically. It caps the number of patients that we can have at any time. It's the only state that has a law like that. There are some campaigns in other states to try to win the same thing, but California has this amazing law. So it's this kind of wonderful floor or foundation for us to fight from. And that means the working conditions are better because you have more coworkers to do the work. There's some state laws about breaks and things like that. And it really is better. That's why I moved to California. But lo and behold, when I got there, I found, of course, management isn't following those rules, but they've been great tools to use for fighting. Some of the challenges, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges is coworkers not understanding that our power comes from solidarity, from unity. I'll give you a specific example. We had some union staffers and also some union members at our psych hospital all talking very negatively about what they were calling, sort of like, they were saying the words race war about this workplace. And the way they would describe it is like, oh, there's the Africans versus the African Americans, and then there's the people that speak Spanish versus everybody else, and there's the white people who are off in the corner and they won't, and the different departments are all divided up like that, like management has people divided up like that. We went and actually talked one-on-one to people in the workplace. What we found was a little bit different than that, actually. And so I had this very interesting experience of talking one-on-one to a worker who was a white person. She's a nurse, and she was saying the exact same things. She was saying, oh, you'll never get the Africans to sign this petition, and they definitely are not going to go on strike with the rest of us, right? Like, you never will. So then we get to, all right, which of your coworkers should we talk to next? We're asking the kind of questions to find out, who do people trust in this unit? And she's like, oh, you got to talk to him over there, and to her, and to this person. And we're kind of like scratching our heads like, gosh, that's one of the people that she would say is, one of the Africans. And then so is that person that she just pointed out. So like what she's telling us is that what she's said about racial divisions is actually not true. And so when we got down to talking to people, people all had the same problems and did see eye to eye. And when they're faced with those conflicts with their boss, say about staffing, or the boss imposing some new rule that was unfair, people actually were able to stick together. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face is people's belief that they're separate and they're not in the same boat. And I think our job as organizers to get people to understand that they're in the same boat and that the only power we have is recognizing that.
I chose to be an educator, generally speaking, because I find joy in teaching others. That's it. I love teaching people about organizing now. It's been my new thing I do. But really, it's about helping kids navigate not only academics, but life. I get to be the role model for so many kids. I've taught hundreds of kids by now in 18 years. And the impact you have on individual lives matters. The allies we make matter. For example, when I worked right over here, I had a family who I taught 6th grade, and I had a son of this family, and they were really concerned that dad was going to be deported by ICE. And they needed an ally to write a letter in support of the family and the goodness that came from their souls. And that was me. And I wrote that letter back in 2011. So allyship is something we bring as educators who understand that every single student deserves an amazing education and an opportunity to thrive. And we know that, right? Teachers are wholesome humans who have compassion and empathy, and we love what we do. There are so many forces against us that we are still here because of our souls and because of our compassion and because we do it for community. That is power. And challenges is really, I would love to tell everybody to go out and be an educator right now. But with that comes the reality of the forces that are strangling us right now. Neoliberal policies in the name of austerity, right? Decades of austerity. Coming down to privatization. We have threats of privatization everywhere, especially in Arizona, where that is where they test out all their ideas from the American Legislative Exchange Council. We are the ALEC's #1 playground. And these are forces, huge forces, right, that have copycat bills that model legislation that are in 35 states now. But you've also seen that educators are the vanguard of the labor movement, right? So we know that challenges exist, but we also recognize the power that comes from our educator labor movement and with the solidarity of everybody else in the labor movement. So there are challenges, but you've also seen the power. So I don't want to stray you away.
So I got a job at UPS partially because it was a good job to get. It's one of the few private sector jobs left in this country where you can have a good living without a 4-year degree, you know? After 4 years of working as a full-timer, you're at top scale, you're making 6 figures, you get paid per hour, overtime after 8, you get Cadillac health insurance, you have a pension. That's a good life for a lot of people. And I enjoy the job. I like being outside. I'm, you know, proud Midwesterner. I love shooting the shit with people. That's what I do for a living now, just out walking neighborhoods, getting barked at by dogs and stuff like that. But beyond that, the personal is the political question, right? I mean, you know, we're still a relatively small movement, right? If socialists are going to concentrate in the labor movement, it's important to pick places that are strategic, and UPS is absolutely one of those. There's over 300,000 of us under contract at UPS. Through our hands passes between 7 and 10% of the US GDP every single day. If all of us put our hands in our pocket, the economy is going to shrink by up to 10% that exact same day. So there's a ton of power there, a ton of power. Here in Chicago specifically, this is like the central node of the logistics system, right? And you know, we could spend a long time talking about the importance of logistics, but you know, you don't need to hear me say that. We can see how much the ruling class is freaking out over a single Amazon warehouse unionizing to understand the importance of this industry.
Kristen and Dennis, there are a lot of injustices in this world: exploitation, pollution, and various forms of repression like racism, sexism, and xenophobia. Unfortunately, the labor movement has not been a steadfast proponent of justice and equality for everyone, but I know that both you and I know that it can be. Can you two speak to how the labor movement intersects with other social movements? And since labor is not inherently socialist, anti-racist, anti-sexist, what can we do to recruit our coworkers to these perspectives?
Yeah, so to speak to the first part of the question, I think it's important to also remember that, you know, the labor movement isn't some like far off union bureaucrat, kind of like what Dennis was saying earlier, like the labor movement, unions, they are the workers, and America's workforce is incredibly, incredibly diverse. You know, it's like, I think that like union membership, like the number of like black people in the US that are union members is like way higher than like the membership of the NAACP, for example. So it's really, really important that we engage with the labor movement in order to build this like multiracial working class movement that we need to win socialism and win a fighting labor movement. So, thanks, yeah. Oh, yeah, no. So I think it's important to remember that, you know, the labor movement and the people that make it up, you know, inextricable links. And it's also important to, you know, go back and remember some history of the relationship between the labor movement and socialism. In like every other developing country in the world, the labor movement and the socialist movement came up together. I can think about like my family in Indonesia back in like the 20th century. You know, a lot of them were involved in the labor movement in some way, but they were also socialists and they were feminists. But it was the capitalists and the bosses who enacted these like brutal McCarthyist and anti-communist policies here and abroad that did everything they could to punish like the feminists, the anti-racists in the labor movement. And that's how that separation that Sean was talking about earlier between the labor movement and socialism more broadly, that's how it came about, and that's why it's kind of incumbent upon us to bridge that divide and introduce socialism into the labor movement.
One of the things that also made me a socialist was my experience with racism. My mom is from China. I was born in China, and I grew up in a pretty white town in Minnesota. And so I was definitely a target just by looking different from other people, like beat up, rocks thrown at, name called, and that kind of shit. And unfortunately, the labor movement doesn't always have the best history when it comes to being anti-racist. I mean, the Chinese Exclusion Act from back in the 1800s was actually supported by unions in California, which is pretty fucked up when you think about it. And so So we have obviously to overcome that fundamental division that exists within our society when it comes to racism, not just racism, but sexism, homophobia, transphobia. All those things are used by the bosses to divide us, to have us looking at each other sideways rather than looking it up at the person who's screwing us all over in common. So that's why we have to come together. And the fact is that the workplace forces us to come together, otherwise we're not going to win. I mean, and I was recounting the organizing in the ER. Our ER has very few white nurses. I can probably count them on one hand, just because that's county. But there were certainly divisions when it came to race. It's not just a white versus black thing in many workplaces. It was similar to what John was saying, in that the Filipino nurses would say, oh, those nurses from Nigeria, they're supporting, so many families back home. There's no way that they would organize an overtime strike. The nurses from Nigeria would say, oh, those nurses from India, they just do what their husband says. They're not going to go and do an overtime strike. But again, they have these weird ideas about others, rather than seeing how we could come together. So it did cause frank conversations within the workplace to say we have to overcome these divisions, these stereotypes that exist. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to come together and do the overtime strike in a way that gets the boss's attention. So we absolutely have to take on these divisions head on. We can't skirt around and say, oh, when someone says something that's racist or sexist, just change the subject and talk about the weather. You actually have to talk about, here's how that idea damages us. Here's how it works against our solidarity and our ability to get the things that we need as workers. You have to have those frank conversations.
While our movement is still young and inexperienced, the American left is no longer in the wilderness that it was in as recent as 7 years ago. Today, we have a vibrant socialist student section that not only prepares young socialists for a life of struggle, but also preserves the experiences and lessons of our organizers so up-and-coming socialists don't have to reinvent the wheel. Kristen, it's a privilege to have you back up here today, and I want to pose this next one to you. As a YDSA alum, what are you doing right now to stay involved in socialist and labor organizing, and how did YDSA influence your decisions?
Like I said earlier, it's so amazing to be back at YDSA conference. This is really where it kind of all started for me, I guess 4 years ago now. So it's a very special place. Right now, I'm preparing to enter a strategic industry. That industry is healthcare, to be a rank-and-file registered nurse. I'm working on my prerequisites right now, applying to nursing school, all that boring stuff. And normally it would be this horrible grind, I imagine, but I'm lucky enough not to be doing this alone. I'm in a group of other socialist nursing students and future socialist nurses from all over the country. Some of them are here today, I know Tej and Sylvie and Serena are here. Hey. And we all have this shared vision to become the top floor of the union military. Really amazing group of people to have. We read about healthcare, the labor movement, and socialism together. We talk about our experiences in school, in training, and being CNAs, all of that. We just support each other. And I'm also organizing with the labor branch in New York City DSA, which is super, super cool. It's this, in the branch, we build this so that socialist activists in New York City can come together and just talk about the labor movement in New York City and what we want to do to improve it. But I wasn't originally gonna go down this route, for the first few years of college, and I actually finished this course, but I was doing that too long. So my plan was to become a doctor and spend a ton of time in medical school and go into debt and everything. But I became an organized socialist, and I was maybe I should become a staff organizer because I really want to organize, dedicate my life to organizing. And maybe I want to work in a nonprofit, I don't know. But overall, I, like many young people, like many of you I'm sure, was looking to give my life purpose while also having, healthcare, a good paying job, a pension, the things that we need in life. So yeah, I decided that nursing was the right route for me because I was interested in medicine, and it was a strategic place for me to be, and there were other socialists doing that as well. But yeah, I learned a lot about the labor movement in YDSA. I have this organization, I have a lot to thank for this organization. There was a lot of concerted political education in my own YDSA. We would do things like read The ABCs of Capitalism by Vivek Chibber, yeah, by him, together, and just talk about socialism and do strike support for New York nurses right after that. Like, it really, really informed the kind of work we were doing, and why labor was so central to like what we were trying to do as socialists. I also was with other YDSAers in Oakland, California, where I'm from, doing strike support. I think Elliot Lewis, who's here now, was like one of the other YDSAers that was doing strike support. And it was really like being with those other YDSAers and talking to teachers from my hometown about like why they're striking and what they're fighting for, that like really moved me to want to be involved in the labor movement. I was also involved in the National Labor Committee in 2020 to 2021, I think, where we were building a rank and file pipeline, put together these really cool rank and file schools, and put together this like rank and file pamphlet you might have seen floating around. So yeah, I have a lot. I really, really want to thank YDSA for like really leading me down this amazing path and this future of struggle.
All right, guys, we're coming up on our last prepared questions, so that means we'll be moving into Q&A soon. If you have a question for our amazing panelists, please line up on either side behind the mic, and we'll rotate between mics to take stack. For our last question, it'd be great to hear from everyone. What do you hope to accomplish as a socialist labor organizer in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I think for us us DSA members at UPS, we're really excited about what the next couple of years are holding. Our contract expires next summer, and after 20 years of class collaborators at the top of the Teamsters, rank and file movements pushed and pushed and pushed and struggled and organized, and now we have leadership at the top that is responsive to the rank and file. And if they're not going to respond to our demands, then they're getting the hell out of the way in 5 years. So for us, in 2018, we voted down our contract at UPS. The contract was one full of concessions in an exceptionally profitable company. And it was concessions put in there by our union's bargaining committee. And our union was organizing a vote yes on that contract. TDU and other reformers organized a vote no. We beat our leadership in that head-to-head contest in the contract. And when we voted that contract down, UPS had a press conference saying we are ready to return to the bargaining table. This is not our last and final offer. 20 minutes later, Hoffa sent out a memo to everybody. The contract is being ratified. It has been forced through. We had a contract illegitimately shoved down our throats, and that was a breaking point for many of us. So we have 4 years of grievances now that we plan on bringing up next year on the streets, and I hope to see many of you out there in the most public and militant contract campaign that UPS has seen in 20 years. Yeah. Now, beyond that, I just, I can't imagine the possibilities in this country right now. I can't. I mean, we are in the middle of an exceptional awakening. I really believe that. What happened at Amazon just a few days ago, what is going on with Starbucks, what's been happening for the past 2 years as the people that are called essential have been forced through this pandemic while the super rich are in a race to go to the moon. I don't know what's going to happen. I think things that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I genuinely believe that. So I'm just along for the ride at this point. I can't wait to see what happens, and I can't wait for the future that we're all about to achieve.
Let's go.
Yeah, so for me personally, I'm just trying to get started in the world of labor organizing. I'm just more immediately trying to finish school, get a nursing job, and really start doing a job that I love. And those aspects of loving the work that you do and being like really, really fucking good at your job are just so invaluable to being a shop floor activist, like Rebecca was saying earlier. So I really want to build that cohort of other socialist nurses taking action in the workplace and in unions. Specifically, if they're in New York, that would be great because I'm looking to expand that cohort too. And we have some YDSAers committed in this room already. Some nurses with me. I already mentioned some before, but like if there are any other nurses, raise your hand, please let me know. Fuck yeah, yes! Okay, we'll talk later. So I'm already feeling really excited and confident in our growing ranks, and it's just amazing to know that like these comrades, some of them now, we're just trying to get through prereqs together, and like we're trying to get through our fucking young adulthood together. We'll be the layer of like militant activists standing shoulder by shoulder, demanding dignity in the workplace, demanding better conditions, struggling for our democratic and worker-led unions, and one day, you know, maybe winning Medicare for all, winning socialism in some sense. So yeah, if that sounds like any of you, if any of you want to stand shoulder by shoulder with me, please let me know after the break.
What was the question? What do you hope to accomplish? I mean, I think we need more socialists in the labor movement, absolutely. I mean, you look what's happening in Amazon in Staten Island, New York, where they won that. It was a conscious effort of people who were not only union activists, but also socialists, as far as I understand it from the outside, that took that project on and wanted to do that kind of work day in and day out. And so what I hope is that more people get into this work, because we have a world to win. The things that are confronting us as union activists, as socialists, are seemingly insurmountable. They're huge tasks that we have before us, whether it's climate change, fighting for racial justice in the society, defunding the police, et cetera. Those things are big things that are going to take massive struggles to win. And I'm 45 years old. I'm pretty old. I've been at this for a minute. So I appreciate the fact that the energy and the commitment to keeping the fight for a socialist world exists here in this room and exists in the society, that potential exists. And so I'm hoping that we see more gains towards that in years moving forward. I mean, I've been a member of the CTU, and that's where I've been doing my work for the last 6 years, and that's certainly been an inspiration to see other activists alongside myself become engaged in the thing in politics. But the one thing I still think to try and figure out is how do we win more socialists from our coworkers? Because I came into it as a socialist already, but I think the project of winning more of our coworkers to socialism is something I want to think more and work with other comrades on how to do that more effectively.
There's some specific things that I would like to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years in my union. I would love to see, so the county I live in, there's a lot of wealth in the county. It's next to Silicon Valley. And one of the very wealthy businesses that's in the county is Tesla, the Tesla factories in our county. And so I would love to see us run a campaign that includes organizing workers, possibly some coordinated striking, including our hospital system and maybe, who knows, the Tesla plant itself, and lots of other public sector workers in the county, to tax Tesla to pay for public health care. Another thing that I would like to see is in my union local, which is pretty huge, covers about half the state of California, 65,000 members. It's most of the city and county and municipal workers in the northern part of the state. There's huge, tremendous potential in that union having coordinated bargaining across all the hundreds of employers' contracts. I think California's economy is one of the biggest economies in the world. I forget what the number is, but something like 7th largest economy in the world, 5th maybe. Thank you, Rebecca. And so there's huge potential in a union that has workers that cover half the state and run all the city, county governments plus other workplaces, coordinating bargaining and striking as huge amount of leverage to change laws and change the way that we're treated at work, change the services that the public that we take care of receive. Those are specific things I'd like to see. And I think the most important thing to tell you all about that I'd love to see is more socialists involved in the labor movement as rank and file organizers. I think there really is, not everyone has to do that, and it's not going to be for everyone, but I think there's just no shortcut around the fact that we cannot win socialism unless we have a powerful, organized working class. And the place where the working class is best organized under capitalism is in the workplace. It's the only place in the US where the working class is truly organized right now. And so there's massive, massive potential. If you have more people like Sean and Kristen and Dennis and Rebecca and myself in our workplaces, imagine what we could do. You've heard stories of what we're already doing. Imagine what we could do if there were more people like us with the same principles and ideas, trying to do the same things, we could achieve even greater things than we already have.
I thought about this long and hard because I've been in this position I'm in Arizona as the strike leader, still running, Arizona Educators United, which is actually an external structure to the union, right? So this is really about organizing the unorganized in Arizona for us, really. What happened in our 2018 campaign, the Red for Ed movement, was we had 20,000 dues-paying members to the union, which is a NEA affiliate. And 20,000 is 1/3 of the total teachers, so 60,000 total. And by the time we were done with our 8-week organizing blitz, really modeled after the Chicago Teachers Union escalation of 2012, is 57,000 people took a strike authorization vote with no legal pathway to take a strike authorization vote. And so my personal goal has been to tell this story. I've been to multiple countries now, virtually. I do presentations on how we organize the unorganized, especially against the right-wing opposition that we have in Arizona. And I think it's a story that needs to be told, about the story that we didn't have a legal pathway to strike. It's not legal, but it's not necessarily illegal either. So there's some gray space we worked in. And we built a structure and a network of over 2,000 volunteers. We called them liaison site-based organizers in over 1,200 schools, and we did that in 8 weeks over the course of a whole state. And what I learned from that, and you can hear it in my voice, I'm so impassioned about this, because it dawned on me that even if you're in a right-to-work state, in a place where union density is very low and the stigma that goes with it is very high, there is a way. And it's organizing the unorganized. 37,000 people plugged into a labor formation for the first time. They're not part of the union. How do we do that? I think we need to learn from each other and learn about these rank and file movements and how we did it and how we stole ideas from other people and embedded them into our plans. That, to me, I want to tell that story. I will tell it every day. I've got a presentation that goes with it, and I think it needs to be told. We all have to learn from each other. So the more we can get the story out about how we did this in such an oppressive state is really, truly something remarkable. And so for me, it's about rank and file strategy, learning how to effectively organize from others, and then bringing that to the educated labor movement in a variety of ways. Panels, writing chapters in books. I wrote a chapter in a book. Eric Blanc has the Red State Revolt. We tell the stories, but then we have to learn from those stories. So to me, the more we can continue to learn from each other, that's my personal goal.
That's the end of our prepared Q&A section. Can we just get a round of applause for amazing panelists? Yeah, in so many ways, the examples that these comrades have set have made our struggle possible. As a burgeoning young socialist in the USA, one of my mentors would always tell me about the struggles of Johnny, and I'm thinking to myself, like, that's the most metal shit I've ever heard, and I want to spend the rest of my life struggling alongside my coworkers, helping them realize their own power. So it means a lot for you guys to be here. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw it over to my left for the first Q&A question, and then let's do one response for questions, just because there's a big line right now.
Okay, it's here. I'm Kevin, pronouns he, they. I'm from UCF YDSA. I just want to ask about campus organizing, labor organizing, because there's a lot of especially restaurants and food services in campus, and they're all owned or by this company like Aramark, and I was wondering if you might have any ideas or tips for that, and if you don't have any, then just let us know how what's a good way to identify a place that's ripe for unionizing.
Do you want to pose that to a specific panelist?
Whichever one is best fit for it. I don't know, whoever has a decent. Nobody?
I'll take a shot at it.
Thanks.
So I would say, as socialists, we always need to be, if we want to assess the situation, we need to think about the material conditions. And so the situation that you're describing is one where the material conditions are a bit different than what we've been describing up here, because the labor tends to be a lot more short term. And so that's going to give the boss a huge amount of advantage, leverage, right? Because let's say if you and all your coworkers organize, it's going to be very easy for them to just get rid of you and then replace you quickly and easily. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't organize places like that, however. I think we just need to think about them a little bit differently. And so probably what you want to do if you're assessing what workplaces might be ripe for that kind of organizing is look at the conditions that are happening right now, right? So an obvious answer is places that there's a lot of, even in the mainstream media, people are aware that there's organizing going on in coffee shops, specifically in Starbucks right now, and that organizing is happening in Amazon warehouses. And so riding that sort of wave is a great thing. We need to see the conditions that exist right now and then take advantage of opportunities. You also want to think about who are the people that work in the place. Are they people that you could easily build a network so that people can communicate with each other? And are there issues that people are ready to fight about? I think one thing that I've noticed, and probably others would tell you they've also seen, is that people get the most agitated and upset and motivated about things that they feel they've had taken away from them, versus sort of like a vision that of something better that in the current world we live in, we're not used to winning things. Always feels impossible to win something better. It feels more real to fight about something that was taken away. That's some of the stuff I would start with.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Ian. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from Lawrence Tech, YDSA. And my question, I guess specifically, is for Rebecca. When the right gets political power and uses that power to execute their social view of the world, they pretty much always do it at the expense of teachers, it seems like. The so-called critical race theory bans, anti-trans laws, anti-gay laws often allow parents to sue teachers as the way that they're facilitated. So my question is, knowing this, how should a left-wing political movement relate to the labor movement and connect those struggles to win political power as well as power in the workplace?
Wow. So what I know is that the reason the culture war exists is because the electorate that they're most concerned about is suburban white moms. And I am literally living in that world right now in Arizona with the CRT stuff. And I've been slightly doxxed with other people for signing the Zinn Education Project pledge that said we're going to teach accurate history, and so we've been targeted personally. Our names are posted in different articles, and they update the list out in where I live, in my town's newspaper. My name is there. And so all of this is about the electorate. Right? So when we think of who they are worried about, and suburban moms are very concerned about school, right? That's why they are jamming in people to run for school board elections. This is their entire platform, is to create this idea that we're socialist indoctrinators, right? That are just here to turn kids into transgender humans. It's horrific and unbelievable. And they're just scaring their base with no tangible evidence whatsoever. And broadly speaking, you kind of think it's working, right? They're winning the narrative, but then when they try to put in ways for parents to complain, the rank and file, we jam those lines, we jam those forms, we jam those things so that they don't work. And the good thing about us, and I'm an elder millennial, I've been called, we are fantastic at digital organizing. And so we have skills and tools to combat these things, but really when you get to the root of it, you think about the electorate. So where do we need to position ourselves? In the suburbs, with those moms. And we need to win back that narrative, and we don't subscribe to that narrative. We don't contribute to that, we don't share about it, we just let it tank itself. We're trying to just let it tank itself, right? We're not gonna touch it. Sure, we have a lot of social media around, this is ridiculous, CRT doesn't even exist. Do you know what standards are? Oh, teachers teach these things called standards, literally adopted by the State Board of Education. Those words don't exist. But then they're putting out diversity, all these things, because that's the movement. Social justice in the classroom is a movement, especially in the science classroom. Absolutely. So I think for us, how do we fight it? We go to that electorate as well, right? We need to go to the target of where they're at, and we need to start winning those narratives back and consider who is voting, because that's all they care about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Amelia. I'm from Boston. I'm actually a Starbucks worker at a store where we're unionizing. Yeah, super exciting stuff. My question is for Sean. So the labor wave has been powered by workers having a real willingness to fight hard to win. There have been a lot of high-profile struggles recently in which union leadership have preemptively ended or averted strikes without agreement from workers on tentative agreements, like IATSE last year and the Northwest Carpenters strike. I think the most recent example is the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers actually dissolved the strike leaders group before a tentative agreement had been reached, let alone voted on. And what ultimately went through included a paltry 3% raise, which is essentially going to be rendered obsolete by inflation. And this is when there was a 97% agreement on striking, with one of the demands being a 20% raise, which I think just demonstrates the militancy of these teachers. And so my question is, what is the role of socialists when union leadership betrays their workers like this, especially when, obviously, if we have members in the workplace, but also when we don't have a presence in that workplace?
Well, first of all, thank you, comrade, for your incredible role in this historic moment as well. I mean, the fight that you all are leading is absolutely inspiring, and I love hearing my coworkers talk about the fact that we're union coffee in Chicago very soon as part of this fight. I think that the question you pose is like a really central one, right? Because the nature of our labor movement for decades, without a conscious element at the heart of it of socialists and communists and radicals, people who have that long-term vision, it has created the space where business union dominates, right? Where people who rise up the ranks in the union or get hired to lead unions, right? That's the simple truth of it. There's entire international unions in this country that are run by people that never worked a day in their lives on the job of that union. What's the purpose of that? You know what I mean? But with the ones that rise up through the ranks to take it, for them, it's like, look, I'm just going to go along to get along. I don't even think about the ideas of capitalism and socialism. For me, I just want to make sure that this ship stays afloat. Keep the just happy enough to keep me getting reelected, and I'm going to keep the bosses just happy enough with us that they're not going to threaten to close up shop or they're not going to cause too much trouble, because I just want to go home at 2 o'clock every day and I want to go practice my swing and I want to go do all this other stuff, right? That business unionism is absolutely dominant, and our job as socialists is to promote class struggle unionism. Dennis over here has a phenomenal prop right here. This great book for sale up in the front, Class Struggle Unionism. Joe Burns has been an inspiration for me and for many others. His writings on class struggle unionism is absolutely essential. And I think the key that we play is that we organize our coworkers and direct our anger and our frustration and our energy against our employer. We direct it against the employing class. And in that, we force our union leadership to pick a side, right? Because when we bring the class struggle to the forefront, they have to make a public position. Are they with us? Or are they against us, right? And when they are against us, that's when the importance of democratic unionism is absolutely essential, because we can vote them the hell out of there. So I think that the role of socialists is not just to go in and to win more workers to socialism. Our job in organizing is to contest power, because we need our unions under class struggle leadership, and we can't have any more of these collaborators at the top. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nathan Boland, he, him, they, pronouns from University of Michigan. And to those who are working in healthcare, what role do you see physicians, pharmacists, mental health providers, and particularly other health and healthcare researchers having in the fight for the labor fight in the healthcare industry?
I can definitely talk about an example that took place here in Chicago, and it's a bit old. In 1974, house staff residents at Cook County, which is the hospital that I used to work, or still work actually part-time, went on a strike because they were fighting against the racist health disparities ever existing in Chicago at the time, where they would basically take patients from rich hospitals, put them in a cab, and send them to poor hospitals to be treated. And so they took a strike and they fought back against that was happening. And that's why we have now what's called EMTALA laws, which basically means that an ER, when they take a patient in, they have to stabilize the patient. They can't just put them in a cab and send them off to the public health hospital. So they can play an absolute central role in organizing and fighting alongside. And that inspired nurses at the county hospital to go on strike the next year. And then we've kind of been dormant for a minute then. The last strike took place at county in June, a one-day strike. So I think those things can make a difference. And the fact is that, you know, residents and who are, you know, people, doctors in training and physicians don't tend to be the most radical people, at least outspoken in my own experience in hospitals, but I think that potential absolutely exists. But I definitely would say, like, respiratory therapists, patient care technicians, all the rest of it, people who work in hospitals have a huge role to play in linking together. The unfortunate thing is that unions are divided. Like, there's 40 different contracts at county. 40 different unions organizing workers in that same place. And so unfortunately, while we were on a one-day strike as nurses, the quote-unquote ancillary staff, I hate that term, were on strike for 18 days because they were a member of a different union, or part of SEIU 73. And I tried to agitate within the nurses saying we shouldn't accept this agreement until all of our siblings are also getting an agreement. And that didn't go very far, unfortunately, but I feel like that solidarity is something that we have it's an opportunity, as we would say, to organize further amongst our coworkers.
Sin, can I break the rules and also answer?
Please.
Okay, so one of the exciting things that I want to share is that after our strike, we saw a pretty big opportunity and helped our attending physicians organize and join our union, and they got recognition and are now in the union with us. And so now we have wall-to-wall, including doctors, housekeepers, food service workers, clerks, social workers, basically everybody in the hospital system is in the same union together. And I think Comrade with the question brings up a really important point, I think, which is that, you know, we often tend to focus on nurses or teachers in schools, but actually healthcare workers in general are in the same sort of strategic, strong position for the most part that nurses are, and all the different jobs in, say, a hospital or clinic play an important role in taking care of patients. And one of our biggest powers when we're trying to have leverage is pointing out all the solidarity that we need to have with the public that we're taking care of. And often the things that the public needs are also things that we need to do our job. And so just to give one example of how that works in our workplace, there was lots of internal division about organizing together with the housekeepers who clean the rooms and keep the place free from infection. And we figured out like kind of a simple way to encapsulate that in one sentence that the housekeepers themselves say all the time now to remind everyone of their power and their role that they play, is that they're on the front lines of infection control. Right, so it's very easy for nurses, doctors to kind of like put them down. Oh, you know, you push a broom. You couldn't understand the kind of important things we do taking care of patients. But actually, we can't do any of we can't provide any of the care for our patients that we do without them. And so I think it's that sort of like solidarity mindset that you need to have in order to see why all the roles that you gave examples of are important.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauren Adams, she, they. I'm from UC Berkeley, and I'm planning to enter the field of education as a teacher and as a rank and file organizer. So So my question is for Rebecca. As you know, I'm entering this field amidst a nationwide exodus from the field of education, and as lots of educators resign instead of organize. So this obviously gives remaining educators a bit more leverage in the workplace because there aren't people to replace us in the events of strikes and militant activism. So my question would be, what advice do you have for someone entering education, wanting to be an organizer? Specifically, how do we avoid discouragement for ourselves, and how do we convince our coworkers to organize instead of resign in order to use this newfound leverage?
It's literally the conversations we have every single day of our lives, right? So I don't have a definite answer. But what we do think about are the forces driving the great resignation in our field. And part of what's really challenging about being an educator organizer is there's this theme, there's this common theme in any school you go that you just close your door and teach because you can control what's behind the door. All the other policy, austerity, all of the privatization is out there. And so another goal of mine is to change that mindset, right? So like when you get into a building and you might start agitating, you might start talking, you might start bringing ideas to the table, is one, take it slow. Because, and I'm not sure what state you're in, but where I'm at right now in Arizona, I can't come out and say words like unionism, solidarity, collective power. I had to be very careful about how I worded things because there is this thinking of, I'm just gonna close my door and teach. Whatever happens out there, I don't wanna know. I don't wanna know, I can control this, I can't control that, the door's closed. So it's shifting the mentality, and the more we can talk to people and help them with consciousness and bringing things to the table, that was a very big struggle in Arizona. And I'm from here, right? It's a totally different mentality. And really those conversations of like, hey, did you know that this is happening down at the Capitol? Or did you know that this legislation is there? And helping awareness. So many teachers just close the door and have no idea that there are multiple forces like the deprofessionalization of our certifications. You don't even need a certificate now to teach. Yet I had to go do a 4-year program, get certified, pay for all of that, and now the GOP just comes in and takes away our certification. So part of that mass resignation is definitely austerity conditions, all of that, but it's also because of the right-wing forces deprofessionalizing our profession. And the struggle is about helping people gain consciousness. So take it slow, because if I ran in there, I'm from Chicago, I'm a union thug, that would not be good. Right? And that's how I want it to be. But I just kept being like, wow, this is really, are you guys okay with this? Like, this didn't happen in my last workplace. Are you sure this is okay? Like, can I see our contract? So I think just, you gotta, one, when you get in there, slow it down, right? Like, you just gotta learn the community, learn the culture, learn who knows things. And if you have a union, obviously join it. But really it's about taking it slow and helping to educate the educators, because they will just close that door, honestly.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Madison, she, they pronouns. I'm from the University of Michigan, but I'm originally from Arizona, so this is for Rebecca. I remember Red for Ed very fondly. I remember seeing all my teachers unite with each other, and it was very inspiring. But I'd like to know like the current status, because I need to go back home and like, what should I say to everyone to help educators? Because I've seen it firsthand. It's shit in Arizona, guys. It is so bad for teachers and students, and I'd like to support my teachers and be like, give back to them and help them. So I'd like to know what I should say to other students back home and like people outside of education, what we should be helping. Like, how should we help?
Yeah. Yay. Hit me up when you're there. The current condition in Arizona. Well, I don't even know where to start. One of the things people need to understand, and this is a real struggle, is we are 2 seats away from flipping the legislature. And that's really a lot of work to movements in other realms, like the movement against SB 1070, the Show Me Your Paper bills, and the community organizers that came before us, right, have been really shifting the mindset in Arizona. We're not there yet, but we're chipping away and chipping away. We have 2 seats, that's it. And really, it's about helping people understand that they are completely voting against their interests if they just down party ballot if they see an R next to someone's name. That is our biggest struggle. And what was the beauty of our movement is we had tons of Republican teachers who had never, their eyes were never opened to what the legislature does. So a lot of education had to happen. We had to teach them how bills run through and how, who are the forces. And I made graphics about how our legislature is owned, 41% of our legislature is owned by ALEC. And so we made all these graphics and made all-star cards and all this stuff to educate. And it's really about, if you come back to Arizona, help people understand that they are voting against their own interests. If they like healthcare, if they like more money for education than prisons, we have the highest, private prison per capita. It's disgusting. It's about helping us shape the narrative and opening people's eyes to voting against their interests, voting against the common good over and over and over again, and elevating the rich and corporations versus people. And that happens in Arizona, right? Because of the ALEC and the GOP controlled. I think it's just, Red for Ed right now, we're still working and moving, and we're helping people support pro-public education candidates or canvassing and all of that, working with community partners. But really help us explain to family, friends, grandmas, grandpas, community that they continue to vote against their interests and give them the knowledge they need about what's really going on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, but if you have any lingering questions or just want to chat our panelists up, they're going to be in that corner over there right when we wrap up. And yeah, let's take our last question.
Hi, my name is Nico. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And what I wanted to ask was for Sean, and it was about the recent vote to unionize in the Amazon warehouse. And I think it caught some of us by surprise because of what happened there. And I guess I just wanted to ask, what can we learn from ALU and what was different there than other labor victories we've seen recently?
That's a great question, Comrade. Thank you. I think that the fundamental lesson from the ALU success is that there isn't like a one or two paths that workers can follow and go step by step according to this specific formula to make change happen and to organize themselves. The working class has the initiative. Every opportunity available to it, the working class can and shall take if the conditions are right. And in ALU, the workers there, the socialists that chose to get jobs there to help organic leaders in the workplace organize, they did a pretty standard organizing campaign. They just did a good job at it, and they won. They didn't need staff that had gone through and gotten multiple degrees in specific things to come and tell them how to do what they needed to do. Because they already knew what they needed to do. They needed to organize, they needed to build their collective fight, and they needed to take on the richest man in history. And they did that, and they won. I think for me, it is a reminder to all of us that the working class is not just the space where we organize. It's not just the space where, it's not just the social force that has the material basis to change this society. The working class is where the knowledge of our movement comes from. We learn from the working class does not learn from us, and I think that that's absolutely essential. So,
Thank you.
One more time for an amazing round of panelists.
Yeah, so one important thing to tell you all before we wrap up here. I want to leave people with some resources that I know have been really helpful for all of us up on the panel, and just some thoughts on where would you go from here if you're organizing on your campus, if you're helping out, you're doing a labor solidarity campaign. So probably one of the most important resources for a lot of us is an organization started and run by socialists specifically to embolden, empower the rank and file in unions in this country, and that's labor notes. There's a labor notes conference coming up where I'm sure most of us will be in June. And I know for me and all my struggles, labor notes books and also just talking to people that I met through labor notes were an absolutely invaluable, indispensable resource. The book that Dennis was holding up, Class Struggle Unionism, is a great book to read if you want to kind of get your gears turning about what unions should be doing. But I can't say enough, those labor notes books just about the nuts and bolts of talking to your coworkers, like Secrets of a Successful Organizer, or thinking about democracy inside unions and how to win power on the job. So Democracy is Power is probably one of my favorite books. Those are great places to start. And then I'd say also, don't forget to just network with people that you've met. Take advantage of the opportunity we have today where we're all together in the same room. Please don't be shy and come up and talk to us or anyone else in the room that maybe has some clues about how you can win whatever campaign you're working on or thinking about joining.
Thank you so much, guys. Before we head out to lunch, I want to welcome up my very good comrade and former YDSA co-chair, Ajmal, who's coming off a very exciting, successful Starbucks union drive in New York City. He's going to talk about the importance of collectively pooling our resources so we can fight the boss.
Thank you for that warm introductions then. So, 3 things before I start. 1, sorry if I cough uncontrollably. I had COVID a month ago and it's left over. 2, I want to let people know that we're having a Starbucks breakout. So right after this, if you are a Starbucks worker or are interested in Starbucks solidarity work, just come up here to the stage and we can figure that out. And 3, I really want to give a big round of applause to Sin for being a big driving force and helping our conference this winter come to fruition. We all know how much COVID sucked, and so having everyone here is just such a great thing to have. It's amazing to be able to meet other people that you organize with, other people that you stand in solidarity with, share ideas, and develop relationships that will hopefully last for the rest of your lives. So I want to open up by asking this. How many of you want to build working class power? How many of you want to win socialism? And how many of you are ready to throw yourself into the fight for socialism and building that working class power? So, like our panelists here, and like we've talked about all weekend, what is the role of socialists? The role of socialists is to merge the socialist movement and the workers' movement, to spread socialist consciousness to the entirety of our class. But in order to do this, we need one thing, and that one thing we need is organization. And the lifeblood of that organization, the democratic organization, are all of you, our members. And all of you, our members' funding is how we remain a self-democratic movement and funds huge projects and new organizing initiatives. Capitalists already have this, so we need to build it for ourselves because they do everything they can to crush us. But we are the majority of society, and so is our membership in the labor movement and socialist movement. Our dues, our funds, and both of these movements will take us so much farther than theirs ever will. And one day, we'll return unto them the very same intensity of class war that they've doled out since the dawn of capitalism and all class societies. So why give dues to YDSA? And it's because YDSA is such a great place in DSA. And I think a lot of people take it for granted and really don't appreciate how great it is to be in YDSA. One of the things that I really appreciated in my time in YDSA as co-chair, not being co-chair, was it's a space to train future socialists and labor leaders that we really don't have anywhere else to practice. It's a great place that we always need to hang on to, and that's why we have it today. It's also possibly the most dynamic and even the most diverse part of our organization, something that is amazing, and we also need to expand broader into DSA as well. And of course, too, in YDSA, we're in a campus section, so it's our chance to actually branch out into working class community colleges and trade colleges, like we've slowly been doing. And another reason, of course, our dues have great staffers on board, like Anna and Caleb, so let's give a round of applause for them. And I realize COVID has fucking sucked. How many of you hate this shit? How many of you hate being inside and on the internet and it's harder to organize because of it? So part of the reason why we need to pay dues is we need to get back to roaring national campaigns like College for All and things like Bernie 2020, breaking the cycle of defeatism that we've been engulfed in since COVID began and boxed us into where we are today. And we need to change this current around back to our height during Bernie 2020 to have every single class soldier, every single one of you in our organization, march outwards to the rest of our class and bring them into this very same project. Actually, not same project, the very same world historic mission that Karl Marx said, the task of ushering socialism into society by the working class. Not any enlightened labor leadership, not anybody above us, not rich funders, it's us and our class. And it's like Deb said, there is no Moses to lead us into the promised land. Because if we can be let in, we can be let out. And that's why we believe in the Marxist principle of class self-emancipation. And that same principle applies to recent history too. Look to our recent wins. Teamsters for a Democratic Union and Teamsters United winning and kicking the Hoffa bureaucracy out of Teamsters. That is something that is amazing to be proud of. And there's other things too as well. Look at Amazon. Who thought we would organize Amazon and unionize Amazon? And even in Bessemer, there are 1,416 challenge ballots, and they may well win there too. And look at Starbucks. Not only are we organizing Starbucks, but we just won the Roastery, their flagship location. There's only 6 of them in the world and 3 in the US. Minneapolis teachers going on a multi-week strike and winning many of their demands. We're back at the height and excitement of February 2020, and we need to do everything we can to hold on to it and not let it go ever again. And that's why we pay dues, because it gives rise to the organization and self-leadership of our class that we saw in these recent victories. It built our capacity and ability to do things like hire more staff we need, to provide stipends to our elected leaders so those who are working class don't sit on the sidelines in our socialist organization. And we also need to fight for those to happen and show the rest of DSA why YDSA is important. When I was YDSA co-chair, we only had 15 chapters when I was first elected. And when I walked out of leadership, we were at 80 plus chapters and roughly 30 unofficial ones. Today, we have 200 unofficial and official chapters in YDSA. This is proof to how much we've been able to do so far. So 1, let's pay our dues, make them monthly, and fight for even more investment into our youth section. And not only do we encourage all members to pay monthly dues, we also need you, each and every single one of you, to be a part of our dues drive, to go back to membership and show people, tell people why it's so important to pay our dues, where our dues go towards, and why they should be invested in socialism, because if we're not, nobody is. And with that, I'm handing it back off to Jake. And real quick before I go, let me see a count of it. How many of you are going to pay monthly dues now?
All right, comrades, I know we're all very excited for lunch, but I have a few quick announcements before we get into that. First off, can everyone please raise your hand if you've signed the YDSA flag in the lobby already?